And coming up on this week's show, the Northumberland Line opens to passengers. Hooray. The Isle of Wight Island Line major engineering reaches its halfway point. And Lord Hendy makes his first appearance as Rail Minister at the Transport Select Committee. And welcome to this week's Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and, oh, wait, he's not here. I'm all on my Todd in the UK studio this week, and a strange feeling it is too, because Mr. Bowker has gone off sunning himself. Sea, sun, sand, Morecambe, Skegness, no, Abu Dhabi. So he's definitely not in the same postcode. So plan A was for Steph and I to record the show together this week. I was looking forward to that, as was she. But poor girl's got the flu badly and didn't think you'd fancy listening to her cough her way through the entire show. So plan B is for me in Lincolnshire and
me, Richard Bowker, here in Abu Dhabi. Now, it wasn't possible to bring all the kit out to be able to do this together, so we recorded this show in segments, but we wanted to make sure you had something good for this week before Christmas, and there's a lot to get through actually. So without further ado, we'll head back to the UK studio and this week's big story from Nigel. It's quite nice actually being rather a long way away from him.
Well, I'm hurt. Damn cheek. Anyway, on to the big news of the week, which is that the Northumberland, I think they should call it that, Northumberland Line officially reopened to passengers after 60 years on Sunday, December the 15th. We love reopenings. Running northeast from Newcastle, the 18-mile route to Ashington was a beaching passenger closure of 60 years ago. The last trains ran on November the 2nd, 1964. The line remained open for freight, however, for Linemouth Power Station and Blythe Docks, which made reopening somewhat easier. However, reinstatement still cost £298.5 million by the time the first train ran on Sunday, the December the 15th, 2024, following 20 years of relentless campaigning by stalwarts like Dennis Fansett, chair of the South East Northumberland Rail User Group. Network Rail carried out its first GRIP formal assessment into reopening as long ago as 2013. These things do not happen quickly, even when there's a railway still in place. Construction got underway in 2022. It's estimated that 380,000 passengers will use the railway by 2034, bringing regional economic benefits of around £70 million a year. It's hoped that they're opening the railway directly into Newcastle city centre with onward major connections to London, York, Edinburgh, Carlisle will be an incentive for employers to set up shop in and around Ashington, and let's hope they do. To get trains running by the year end, services were launched only at Ashington and Seaton Delaval. Other stations to open in 2025 will be Newsham, Bedlington, Blythe, Bebbside and Northumberland Park. Ashington Station, incidentally, opened on March the 1st, 1872, and in 1911 it sold 260,000 tickets. By 1951, this had declined to just 40,000, and doubtless many fewer by the time Dr. Beeching came along with his beady eye in the early 60s. Now, I'm fairly certain that there will be a triple jolly going on soon, by which Steph, me and Richard will all head northeast to Newcastle to take a look at this reopening. I certainly want to see it in action. And we'll keep you posted about that. But now it's time to head back to Richard in the Abu Dhabi studio to find out what's been happening at the Transport Select Committee this week. So, Richard, back to you under your palm tree.
Well, it's rather more frangipani and bougainvillea in the garden here. But no, that's absolutely right, Nigel. Last Wednesday, December the 11th, Rail Minister Lord Hendy was joined by Alex Hines, Director General for the Rail Services Group at the Department for Transport, as well as Conrad Bailey and Alan Over, both DFT senior officials, to give oral evidence for their plans for renationalisation, HS2, and really anything else that the committee wanted to cover as far as rail was concerned. We previously heard from the Secretary of State for Transport before Louise Haigh stepped down. The Secretary of State for Transport has a very wide brief. It's aviation, it's maritime, it's roads, it's local transport, it's everything as well as railways. So for followers of the railway sector, hearing from a brand new rail minister is a big event. And new ministers tend to be brimming with enthusiasm at the start of their tenure. I mean, that's completely understandable. But this is no ordinary rail minister. So often in the past, we've been treated to rail ministers who've no real background in the sector, and quite possibly see the role as a bit of a sort of a transit point between a junior ministerial role and more impressive power. But finally, we have a rail minister who's got transport in his blood, and with 9 years as chair of Network Rail, he would be bursting at the seams to explain that how now, as the hunted becomes the hunter, things would be changing. So confidence was high. Now, I do encourage everyone to listen to at least some of the Transport Select Committee. We'll put a link to the Parliament TV site onto our website. You'll draw your own conclusions. What I'm now about to describe is what's my initial reaction. But that initial reaction is that if you were looking for an abundance of vision and energy and passion, you might perhaps be somewhat disappointed. Rail reform dominated the early exchanges at the Transport Select Committee in this particular hearing. That's understandably so. There was a remarkable moment about 30 minutes into the hearing when the Strategic Rail Authority made an appearance from the grave. In what felt for all the world to me like a set-piece question with a set-piece answer, Lawrence Turner, the Labour MP for Birmingham Northfield, asked what, if any, were the lessons to be learned from the SRA. The last time he noted that an arm's-length railway organisation to lead the railways had been established. Then followed a rather bizarre discourse from Lord Hendy, setting out his view as to why the SRA had not worked. Now, I'm not going to bore anyone here with an explanation of why his comparison of his experience of Transport for London and the SRA was confused, given the very material difference in the legal structures between those two organisations. Because I don't think that was really the point of what he said. Rather, it did appear to be a sort of a thinly veiled political warning that if one steps out of line, consequences follow. Now, that doesn't bode well. And if that was the point being made, there were probably rather less gauche ways to have made it than the way he did. But since, frankly, they're largely irrelevant anyway, we'll move on. Now, it was not, however, the only time that detail eluded him. When talking about the Transpennine route upgrade, again in answer to a question from Lawrence Turner, Lord Hendy said, "The first thing to say is that the government are delivering a Transpennine upgrade. I can't get the number right. I keep quoting 13 billion, but it may be 11 billion or 12 billion. It was an attempt at humour, perhaps, but if so, it was very ill-judged. The difference between 11 billion and 13 billion is obviously 2 billion. It's the same amount as the combined saving, according to Chancellor Rachel Reeves at least, from cutting the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, that's 1.5 billion, and laying waste to the agricultural sector from changes to inheritance tax on family farms. That's another 500 million when it gets to, I think, in sort of a couple of years' time. Now, given how raw those two matters are for so many ordinary working people as well as pensioners, for a government minister to appear to be so blithely cavalier about a trifling 2 billion here or there is one might conclude insensitive, to say the least. Mind you, the big strategic questions also appeared to fare no better. Rebecca Smith, the Conservative MP for South West Devon, asked, "In the previous Parliament, the GBR transition team was preparing a long-term strategy for rail. What became of that? And when do the government plan to publish the strategy they want GBR to work to?" The minister's reply, "I'll turn to Conrad." Now, the transcript of the hearing is actually kind to Peter Hendy here in that only Conrad Bailey's reply is recorded. But if there was one political question, just one question that you would expect a rail minister to nail, it was when the government's rail strategy would be forthcoming. Yet, too often in this hearing, it felt like the minister was passing the buck to his officials, who, in fairness, performed reasonably well in dealing with this. Conrad Bailey and Alan Over, they're experienced officials, used lots of words to say probably slightly less. Alex Hines, a little less experienced, maybe a bit earnest, did at least give more detail where he could. I'm sure he'll learn. Then there was Network Rail. Now, often at this hearing, when members were talking about Network Rail and the things that they hadn't got a grip of, there was a sort of a rather peculiar sense of an out-of-body experience. It seemed curious, for example, that when discussing the absurdly high costs of the Great Western Main Line electrification or accessible stations, none of the members pointed out that Peter Hendy had been chair of Network Rail for 9 years. Now, perhaps these early skirmishes or one's first appearance at Select Committee are gentle affairs and the rough stuff comes further down the track. But, for example, at one point, Lord Hendy, when talking about access at stations, said, "I will say one other thing on this subject, which is that the industry has become rather too used to believing that accessibility can only be delivered with pairs of lifts and a bridge. I have asked Andrew to go back and look again at stations where accessibility improvements could be made without massive expenditure in order to make sure that we're not missing some obviously small and cheaper things to be achieved." Now, that was one occasion when I found myself agreeing wholeheartedly. But had I been a committee member, I would have felt the urge to then say, and would it not have been a good idea to have asked that question of Andrew Haynes when you were his boss at Network Rail for the last 6 years and accountable for the company? Instead, the transcript of the hearing records the chair of the committee, Ruth Cadbury MP, just saying the devastating words, "Thank you." Now, there was a fair amount of discussion on electrification. They were moments, actually, it's worth pointing out, when Ollie Glover MP, Lib Dem MP for Didcot, showed not only for the first time in this hearing, he's going to be a real pain in the neck for ministers with his questions, because they were often full of detail and understanding. One of the questions that was discussed about electrification was East-West Rail. Discontinuous electrification, according to the minister, is going to be a brilliant solution, he said in answer to a question. And he followed that up with, "My prediction on East-West Rail is that it will be a stunning success at a reasonable price." Interesting. Well, on a 100-mile-an-hour high-capacity railway that has the potential to be a very key strategic rail corridor, I have to say, I beg to differ, Minister, and I'm not in a minority of one on that. And those hoping for early release, or at the very least time off for good behaviour, from the emasculation that we've seen by the DfT and the Treasury in recent years, would have also been disappointed at this hearing. For example, on East Coast Main Line, according to Alex Hines, "We're working on a new timetable for the East Coast Main Line. The industry has made a recommendation for an improved timetable, and ministers are currently looking at that." Presumably, it will then be for ministers to decide. Might be worth a quick call to Chris Grayling, actually, to see how well that went the last time. On HS2 and the capacity crunch arising from the cancellation of Phase 2, Hendy said, "There's a major piece of work that Alan Over and his people are engaged with to work out the future of the betterment of the railway in the Midlands and the north of England, which clearly that forms part, and without doing a whole piece of work to work out, when you have Phase 1, how it might be used for the benefit of the nation, not just of Birmingham, but in connection with the rest of the railway network. From that, there is a further piece of work about where new lines should be built, who should pay for them, and how they should be done." Well, you can pick the bones out of that word soup, if you'll pardon my mixed metaphors. But one thing I think is clear. This is the DfT's railway world. We're not only living in it, but we're going to be living in it for some time yet. Now, in the interest of balance, this was the minister's first time in front of the Transport Select Committee as Rail Minister. And that probably deserves some slack to be cut. Yet this was not Peter Hendy's first rodeo as a high-profile witness in such a forum. Some will say, "Oh yeah, but he's a wily old fox. He's experienced in making sure that he does not say too much at the beginning and instead keeping his powder dry for the future." Fair enough. Peter Hendy is experienced and he knows how the game is played, but be under no illusion. This was not vintage Hendy. Far from it. There were flashes of brilliance, the occasional glimpse of the humour that has amused us in the past, but they were fewer than we're used to. No, this was a performance that stuttered at times, seemed frequently disconnected, and occasionally even sour. It was almost as if he's got the big job now, but has realised how much constraint comes with that when you're a minister on what you can actually say. Does he even wonder whether it was worth it? And what comes next? Well, who can say? Probably only him. Still, let's see what the Christmas break brings. We probably all need a bit of time off. Let's hope that everyone, especially the Rail Minister, comes back in the new year with renewed vim and vigour. Because if he doesn't, we really do have a problem. Now, quick little postscript on Alex Hines. The Times reported on the 16th of December that rising star Alex Hines is a leading contender to be running GBR, Great British Railways, as CEO. Well, I hope so, for two reasons. First, I've known Alex for some time, and I like him. He's ambitious, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's no bad thing to give a senior job to somebody who actually wants to do it. Second, and as Peter Hendy said, actually, in fairness, he's run a vertically integrated setup in ScotRail. Only Tim Shoveler, now at Freightliner, can really claim to have done something similar, certainly amongst the new cadre of senior rail leaders. But if they are going to appoint Alex, I hope they do it quickly so we can prize him away from the heart of the Department for Transport. Just a few times in that hearing, his language was a little bit too Sir Humphrey for my taste. Full absorption, of course, is a long way off, but let's not take any risks. And anyway, the sooner the better, because then we can get really cracking. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that quick pen picture of the Transport Select Committee. I really do recommend dipping into that. It's about 2.5 hours. There's some actually really interesting stuff, and it's well worth your time. But for now, let's head back to Nigel.
Thanks, Richard. I dare say you've got a nice little cocktail out of shot with an umbrella in it somewhere. Enjoy. And now it's time to do our all-important thank you to everyone who's left us a super thanks on YouTube this week. And you lovely people are Chris Exley, Graham Webster, Peter Curtis, Paul Roberts, Bob Walsh, and Marion Bloom. We really do appreciate so many of you giving us these super thanks. So thank you very much indeed from all three of us. And welcome also to our new gold and silver members, who are Keith Mapley, Johnny Transer, and Neil Howard. And you can see all our members to whom we're very grateful in the end credits of the show. Richard has been very busy recently sending out members' mugs to all the silver and gold members who've been with us for at least 3 months. So if you haven't already sent us your postal address, drop us an email to info@greensignals.org and we'll pop you on the list for your goodies. And you can take your place in the queue on Richard's kitchen table en route to the local post office. But for now, let's head off back to the Middle East and see if the Abu Dhabi satellite connection is still working. Richard, are you there?
Thanks, Nigel. I am indeed still here. It has, in fact, started to rain a little bit, which it does around this time of the year here in Abu Dhabi, but it's actually jolly refreshing. So I'm enjoying that. Now, let's move on to a little bit of good news, and that's the Isle of Wight. Now, those who follow Green Signals regularly will know that a few months ago I went to the island to see the work that's going on there on a very substantial blockade on the pier, on the section of line that goes from Ryde Esplanade Station to Ryde Pier. And we promised that we would keep you updated with how the work was going on. Well, before I came away on holiday, I had the chance to talk with George Murrell from Network Rail. Very grateful for him giving up some of his personal time to be able to do this quick chat. But it was very interesting to see how they were getting on.
Well, delighted to be joined by George Murrell, Wessex Route Renewals Director for Network Rail. Welcome back again to Green Signals. And George, hope everything's going okay in the run up to Christmas.
Yes, thank you, Richard. Great to be here. Lovely to see you again. And obviously, the last time we met, we were on Ryde Pier.
We were. It was sort of quite windy, wasn't it? And we were watching the sort of the tide, and it was clear that it was going to be quite a challenging project. But you've reached what I believe is quite an important milestone now. What's that in the context of the pier?
Yeah, so we had actually when we last spoke, we discussed the 4-week closure that we had planned for the whole entire 8.5 mile line, which
Yeah.
we delivered a significant amount of output there. We made best use of the access, so that was really good, and delivered everything that we said we were going to deliver. So in terms of the track work through the Esplanade station to obviously improve the stepping distances. A huge amount of maintenance on the line, tamping, works on Park Road and Rink Road, Sandown girder, braiding, footbridge reinstatement, and lots of other sort of signal cable work, maintenance activities that we completed.
Yeah.
So that was a huge milestone come the 6th of October. And now we're just under halfway through the 9-month closure of the railway line between Ryde Esplanade and Ryde Pierhead. And I'm pleased to say that we are on programme. So we are on target to hit the 6th of May next year, which is when we're planning to hand back the railway, open the railway up again between Ryde Esplanade and Ryde Pierhead.
Fantastic. Now, these are old assets. I mean, we saw it together when we were actually stood on the pier. And old assets do have a habit of throwing up some surprises, things you weren't expecting. Has that happened in this case, or is it largely sort of proceeded as you expected?
So this isn't the first time we've worked on the structure, and we completed a great deal of work on the substructure the last time we had the closure, which was back in 2023. And I'm pleased to say it hasn't thrown too many curveballs upon us, and we learnt a lot last time we were there. We were exposing quite a lot of sort of infrastructure fatigue, damage, corrosion, which is why we've kind of applied those lessons to now that we're back again. So no immediate surprises, but like I say, we're sort of halfway through the structure, so we haven't got to the sort of the full unearthing of what we might find. But certainly everything we worked on so far has been expected. We've had all the equipment, all the machines there to deal with it as we planned. So yeah, nothing horrendous. But of course, the condition of the structure is pretty poor. So we're putting the right plans in place to deal with that.
Sure. I mean, I just suddenly thought actually as you were talking there, Storm Bert, recently Storm Dara, pretty brutal storms had big impacts on all sorts of infrastructure in the sort of southwest and so on. Has that had an impact at all, or were you sort of ready for that?
So when we were there back in August, it was August, and it was a nice day. But as you mentioned earlier on, the conditions there were even quite challenging with the high tides, obviously the swells that we have to deal with. So yes, it has presented us with very tricky working conditions. Horizontal rain. The sea that's splashing up and over the structure onto the team that are working there. And I'm really proud with the progress that the team on site have made. They've just carried on, keep calm, carry on, and they really have. And yes, it's caused us some sort of delay because we've had to stop to make sure it's continually safe. But when I say stop, that's the sort of 30 minutes, 30, an hour here or there. Because actually, last weekend through Storm Dara, the guys didn't stop. Oh, sorry, they didn't plan to not work the weekend. They still planned and they still delivered output. So they made sure that they were very rigorous in terms of the control measures in place to keep everyone safe. But it certainly wasn't sort of, as one would probably expect, lost time or an opportunity to lose output. We sort of marched on and still delivered some good work last weekend.
Brilliant. So, in terms of the I suppose we're coming up to Christmas. Do they get a break over Christmas, or is it you just sort of keep going because you've got the blockade?
So we need to of course manage people's fatigue, the team's fatigue, and yes, Christmas Day, Boxing Day, I think will be an acceptable time off for them. But we're really working right up to Christmas and continue there, pretty much immediately thereafter, because we realise that closing the railway line here is extremely disruptive. the last thing that we want to do is not be working there, and particularly the perception of the teams not working is wrong. You know, we are there. We understand how really important this job is, and we have to make maximum use of this opportunity to deliver the works at Rye Pier. So, yeah, a very, very short break, but we will be continuing right through to ensure we hit that date in May.
Brilliant. So May's the date. That's the
May
planned
the 6th.
return of the May the 6th. Well, look, George, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for coming on and just giving us that update. It's an amazing project. These are always challenging, but I could see firsthand that one was going to, present some challenges. But for the island and the Island Line, I'm sure it'll be a happy day when they get the railway back. So for now, thanks so much and good luck. Have a great Christmas, and hopefully see you in the new year with an update then.
Richard, thank you so much, and like I say, it's really enjoyable to be here. I was, if you don't mind, going to add one more thing, if that's okay.
Please do, absolutely.
So interestingly, we work very closely with the Heritage Line, railway line, it's a steam line on the island,
of course,
and we are actually providing them with a lot of materials from Rye Pier to reuse on their steam railway line. So they're having base plates, they're having sleepers, they're having sections of rail, which incredibly is actually much better condition than the infrastructure they have on their components on their infrastructure. So there's a great sustainability sort of message here as well, an opportunity that we're really making the most of to recycle and recascade those materials onto a local heritage line on the island. So that's some really great news that's come out of this as well.
That is fantastic, because not only is it great for sustainability and recycling, you know, the heritage sector, as we were talking about recently, has got some challenges at the moment, you know, rising costs and so on. So everything like that helps. So that is a terrific example of a partnership between you guys, between Network Rail and the Isle of Wight Steam Railway. Absolutely superb. Well done. I'm sure they're chuffed to bits. So thank you very much. Anyway, so. George, thank you for your time and have a great Christmas and speak soon.
Thank you, Richard. You too.
Well, thanks once again to George Murrell for that, and we will keep that project updated and see how it concludes early in the new year. But for now, back to Nigel in the UK.
Thanks, Richard. So I've been back from the sunshine in Abu Dhabi to the rather gloomy, miserly day here in Lincolnshire. And here we go with the news roundup. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has been reported in the Financial Times as not wanting to give, quote, false hope to proponents of a partially private-funded HS2 Phase 2. Oh dear, doesn't sound good, does it? She has apparently insisted that the government's transport focus is on connectivity within the north of England rather than on the West Coast Main Line. Of course, former Transport Secretary Louise Haig had said it was perfectly viable to explore private funding for the line. But this doesn't sound promising, does it? Apparently, Reeves has said that any northern transport proposal will be included in the comprehensive spending review, which is expected next summer, but she has not elaborated on what that might include. Now, the next story was sent in to us by lots of green signallers, so thanks very much, but especially Stephen Menzies, Ryan Hogg, Andrew Kirk and Alan Morton for pointing us towards this one. A lorry driver has been charged after the HGV he was driving crashed off the A74 motorway and onto the railway near Gretna. ScotRail had to cancel services on the line for 11 hours for investigations and repairs to take place. The driver was apparently taken to hospital and has been charged with a road traffic offence. And this next story is also one that shows why road vehicles do not mix well with the railway. A 60-year-old man was put in a critical condition when a bus took a wrong turn in Glasgow city centre and became wedged under a railway bridge on Cook Street. The crash tore part of the vehicle's roof off and 5 other men and 1 woman received minor injuries. Police Scotland is now investigating the causes of the crash. This same bridge, incidentally, was crashed into by a bus in May last year, resulting in 10 people being taken to hospital, so it's not the first time for this bridge. Another sad story, I'm afraid, now. On December the 4th, a fatal attack was carried out on an Elizabeth Line customer experience assistant for MTREL at Ilford Station. George Ortega, 61, was taken to hospital with serious head injuries following the incident at about 20:50, and he died 2 days later. Ayodele Jamgabadi, 28, from Ilford, was charged with grievous bodily harm, but the BTP is apparently now applying to amend the indictment to reflect George Ortega's death. Just awful. Nobody should face such violence while doing their job, and a reminder of the daily risks which all our front line are potentially subject to. And here's a better story to end the news roundup on this week, though. Major work to protect and strengthen the Grade 2 listed Yarm Viaduct is nearly complete. Network Rail has been securing the structure supports its piers by drilling more than 600 piles deep into the ground. It's an £8.2 million investment in the 172-year-old viaduct on the Northallerton to Eaglescliffe line. When it was built, 14 of its 43 piers were not built into the bedrock, and because some of the foundations are timber, they've deteriorated over time. This has created slight movement along the 690-metre-long viaduct, and, just as you can get subsidence in old buildings, cracks appear. So, to prevent that from happening at Yarm, Network Rail and Amco Giffen designed a solution to keep everything operating safely as it should. Work is due to be complete next year. Excellent. And that's the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send us any snippets of news, you can do that in an email to news@greensignals.org. Can't promise to read them all out, but if we read yours, we'll give you a name check. And now, back to Richard, if he isn't gone off for a beer somewhere, for my most favourite part of the week. Can you guess what it is?
Yes, that's right. It's the quiz. Now, a slightly different quiz this week, but nonetheless, it's actually very pleasant to be able to do the quiz without the silly comments from my co-presenter. Now, last week's quiz was an anagram, Nigel's favourite thing, and it was this: if I attached a small anode to something that was already really dead, where would I be? I foolishly thought that would be a little trickier than normal. It wasn't, of course. Dozens of you got it right, and got it right pretty quickly. I would be on the closed Buxton to Matlock line through the Peak District, and small anode, of course, is Monsell Dale, and really dead is Darley Dale. So I would be between those two, which actually happens to be Bakewell, where I used to, or pretty much Bakewell, where I used to live. And the winner, randomly chosen from all the correct answers, was Mike Wright, who I believe is actually in Perth, Western Australia, which causes us two issues. One, it means that my wife now has bragging rights. She's also from Perth, grew up there, and will no doubt tell me how good people from Perth are. And it also means we've got to think about how to ship a mug over to you. But Mike, if you could send us your address details, we'll get that organised for you. Now, we're not going to set a quiz question this week whilst I'm over here on holiday. And actually, next week, we're taking a break from our regular show. We've got something really special for you on Boxing Day. Please do watch out for that. It's something very special. It's slightly personal, but I think everybody will really, really enjoy it. And it'd be a nice thing to do over the Christmas break. So until then, it just remains for me to wish you very happy Christmas. Have a wonderful break. And we'll be back with the regular shows after Christmas with a new quiz, of course. But for now, it's back to Nigel.
And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week on this split delivery green signals from different parts of the planet. Thanks so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you haven't already, do subscribe to us if you're watching the YouTube channel, which really does help. And if you really want to support us, find out about membership on either YouTube or Patreon. So until next time, it's goodbye from me in Lincolnshire, and
it's goodbye from me from the lovely warmth of Abu Dhabi.
Thanks ever so much for being with us on this globe-spanning special.